it says to do. Alright, so what you would do on this one, these are the numbers that we can roll for the first time. So this is our first roll. And then these are going to be the numbers that we roll the second time. And we're supposed to be talking about the number on the first roll will be less than the number on the second roll. So can we have a 1 and a 1? Because is that where they're less than? Okay, not when they're 2 and 2. What about when they're 3 and 3? What about when they're 4 and 4? Or 5 and 5? Or 5 and 6? None of those would work. So the first roll is less than the second roll. This is our first roll, 1. Is that less than 2? So that one would work. What about this one? This whole bottom? Okay, would these numbers over here work? Okay, so let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 of them out of 36. But that's not one of our answer choices. Divide by 3, what would you get? Does that make sense? It's a microphone. It records the lesson. Okay, so we're looking at lesson 58 today. Lead coefficients and then completing the square. Do y'all remember completing the square?
Yes. Well, we've had that lesson.
So, what do you do when you complete the square?
Take the full and then you have
Okay. That's what you start off with, yes. So what we're going to look at today are when we have leading coefficients. So, if you have an x squared term, that is going to be your largest degree for a quadratic equation. The number in front of the x squared term is called the coefficient. So it's called the coefficient of the term. Y'all have heard of the term coefficient, right? Just the number in front. So when you take the coefficient, if you put it at the front of it, it's going to be at the very beginning. If you take your x squared term and put it at the front, because it's the largest power, you're going to have your x squared term at the beginning of your equation. And so it's going to become your lead term, because it's the leader, it's at the very front. So we have this x squared term, we have a coefficient in front of it. If we make that x squared our lead term, the number in front of the x squared is going to become our leading coefficient. Because it's going to be the coefficient that's at the very beginning of the equation. Do you get where the term lead coefficient comes from? You'll see how that works? So if we have a quadratic equation, what is our highest power? The 2x squared is our highest power. So we're going to put it first. What term would come next? The 3x, and then we would have minus 4. And so where is our lead coefficient? It's the 2. So it's at the front. Okay? So when you are completing the square and your lead coefficient is not 1, you have to add a step to your completing the square. You have to first divide every term by the lead coefficient. So if it's not a 1, you have to divide everything by it.
Oh.
So far, you haven't had anything but a 1 for your lead coefficient. But now we're going to have numbers instead of just a 1 for our lead coefficient. And so first you have to divide by the lead coefficient. All right, so let's look at an example. We have 4x squared plus 3x minus 3 equals 0. And we want to solve by completing the square. So what is the first thing that we need to do? Why by 4? Yeah? It's our lead coefficient. So if we divide everything by 4, what would we get? Okay? So that is the first step. Now we complete the square just like we've done in the past. So what do we do? Okay, so keep the x squared and the 3/4 x on one side and move the 3/4 over. Now that we moved our number over, what do? Half this. So what is 3/4 times 1/2? 3/8. 3/8. And then what do we do with that number? What is 3/8 squared? 9/64. What do we do with that 9/64? Put it on both sides. Do what? Mm-hmm. Does everyone see where the 9/64 came from? Half this and then square it. What comes next? This has to factor. This is an x. What number goes here? 3/4 is right there. It's this number over here. 3/8. It's always the number that you take half of. I mean that you like multiply by 1/2. Okay, and then equals, what is, or 4 times what would give me 64? 4 times 16. So that would be a 64. And then 3 times 16 would be 48. So 48 plus 9 is 57/64. You're just adding your fractions together so far. No. Now we're going to take the square root. On the left side, what do we have? X plus 3 over 8 equals plus or minus. Do we know the square root of 57? So we leave it as the square root of 57. What is the square root of 64? So you put that. Now what? Move the 3 over 8 and you'd have minus 3 over 8 plus or minus the square root of 57 over 8. And that's your whole answer. Yes, we're going to do more examples. The only thing that's different is the very beginning. The rest of it is the same, but we just have fractions. But yes, you've probably forgotten how to complete the square a little bit. Here? Okay, so you make this into the square root of 57 over the square root of 64. And what is the square root of 64? 8. So you can't leave a fraction under a radical. Okay, so let's look at another one. What is the very first step that you do? Y by 5. It is your lead coefficient. So you have x squared minus 1/5 x minus 2/5 equals 0. Now to complete the square, what do? Move the 2/5 over. Now what do? Okay, so negative 1/5 times 1/2 is negative 1/10. What do we do with that negative 1/10? Square it, which is 1 over 100. Does that make sense? Okay, so now what do? Yep, because it's squared. This number over here with the x. Okay, so now we're going to factor it. What number goes right here? Negative 1 over 10. Where do we see that number otherwise? Over here, before we squared it. It goes on both sides. This is how it factors into here. Because negative 1/10 plus negative 1/10 is negative 1/5. And negative 1/10 times negative 1/10 is positive 1 over 100. So now we got to simplify the right side. 2/5 is the same thing as what over 100? 40 over 100. So what is 40 over 100 plus 1 over 100? 41 over 100. Do y'all see how that works? Okay, take the square root. What do you get on the left side? X minus 1 over 10 equals, okay, but remember when you take the square root, plus or minus? Do we know the square root of 41? We do know the square root of 100. What is it? Okay, So what would our answer be? All right, so x equals 1 over 10 plus or minus the square root of 41 over 10. Only if this is not a radical. Then you would have two actual answers. Okay, let's look at a practice problem. See if you can do this one all by yourself. If you're not finished, just keep working. I'm going to work it up here just in case you got it wrong, so you can see where you messed up. Did you get that? Anything I need to go over on this one? Nothing? Okay, let's try one more. Alright, so again, I'm going to work this one. I think y'all all got the right answer. But you're going to start by dividing by 3. Did y'all all get that? Does that make sense? Any questions there? Okay, so what is your homework?
6:30.
What lesson?
Okay.
When is it due?
Tomorrow.
Okay.